start by thanking my officials within the Scottish Government for all their work and also the parliamentary officials too. And I also want to extend my thanks to all members who have contributed to the debates in and around this bill. I do want to assure you all that emergency legislation is not my default position. But I have, even when we have disagreed, appreciated the engagement with members across the political divide, even when at times I've been challenged on the resources for implementation, and then when people have complained about the cost when I deliver those resources to the Daily Mail or whatever. Because fundamentally, I believe it's not unreasonable for members of the public, or indeed for any member of this Parliament, to ask how this bill makes them safer and why people are having their sentences reduced. And the answer to this, in short, is that we all have a vested interest in rehabilitation, but that has to be a rehabilitation that works. Rehabilitation is, of course, about challenging people on their behaviour, but it's also about engaging them, and it's also about the importance of relationships. It's not about enforcement or indeed tick-box exercises. And I know at the start of, I think it was the Stage 1 debate, that both Liam Kerr and Liam MacArthur made a reference to me in the context of having a hospital pass, which of course is somewhat wry for me as a former prison social worker, but also as a former hospital social worker in a psychiatric hospital. There's two things I know in my bones. I know that right now, neither Liam would swap places with me right now, because you both have a luxury that I don't have. And despite the challenges, Presiding Officer, right now there is no other job I would choose to do. And I know that I'm not alone in this. But this work for me is both deeply personal as well as political. And yes, I'm a 54-year-old woman who's grown up in a society that has endemic misogyny and where violence against women and girls remains endemic and continues to be on the rise. Yes, I'm the Cabinet Secretary for Justice and Home Affairs, and yes, I'm a former prison social worker. Often forget I'm a politician and still think of myself as a social worker. It is not a choice between supporting prison staff, supporting victims, or indeed supporting prisoners. We have to be delivering for everyone. And I go back to this again with the letter that I received, that we all received from the Prison Officers Association, when they said, I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone that while we are extremely proud of the incredible work our members are doing on a daily basis in our prisons, we are extremely fearful for their physical and mental health the longer they are asked to put themselves in harm's way. And that's why I need to take and I need to lead action now. And I don't have the luxury of not pursuing every option available to me. I will in a moment, Mr MacArthur, time permitting. Presiding Officer, when the population in custody is high and complex, where we have vulnerable people mixed in with dangerous, serious organised crime nominals, rehabilitative activities are indeed curtailed. Time in their cells has increased, tensions are raised, relationships strained, frustrations boil over into violence. And maybe for some people there is some sort of reassurance that, well, it's behind prison walls. But prisons are not the end of the line. They should not be out of sight, out of mind. What happens in that space before release, and crucially what happens after release, matters. And that actually matters much more in whether the release point is at 50% of the sentence or 40%. And yes, I believe in punishment, I believe in protection of the public, but I also in equal measure believe in rehabilitation and reintegration. Because if they are not safely accommodated, if our prisons do not control and care for those who pose the greatest risk to our society, there will be more victims in prison, but there will also be more victims in our community. Most prisoners return to our communities, Presiding Officer. Most of them will return to our communities. So we need to be invested in changing lives for safer communities, and that, of course, includes for our children as well. Presiding Officer, my apologies deeply to Mr MacArthur, but this bill, I accept, is not a panacea. It will reduce the prison population from what it would otherwise be, but it is a necessary step. But I can assure you it will not be our last step. And the two Liams, Karen MacArthur and indeed Mr Green, perhaps should be a wee bit careful for what you wish for, because I intend to see this through, and I very much hope that the gentleman will join me too in this endeavour, because we have to move beyond the narrative, move beyond the problem of why, and get to the how and the when. And my very final word, Presiding Officer, is yes, we can critique the past, debate the future, but the question tonight is now. We need to move beyond the why. We know why. This is about the how and the when is now, Presiding Officer.